Okay, so we're back, and the Cleveland Browns lose their second game in a row. They're now 2-3 after losing to the Chargers in a game that, you know, every phase of the team had an opportunity to win and couldn't get it done, which encapsulates this little part of the season the Browns have going right now, and then just sort of gives you this sort of overall sense of just frustration that nothing's going as well as it should be. But quick shout out to Bree's parents, who celebrated their 46th wedding anniversary. I'm sure they're very excited.
At the Browns game, yes.
And they got basically the same thing they've gotten for about at least half of those years.
So Pete, I just have to say a quick story about my parents really quick, because obviously, like, yes, congratulations to them. That's a very long time to be married. My mother is the eternal optimist. So obviously that's me. I obviously get that from her. My dad is the ultimate pessimist. So their relationship is obviously very balanced in a sense of one being doom and gloom and the other one being bright and cheery. So my dad, a couple of years ago, I actually gifted him tickets to the Browns game when they played the Seahawks. Do you remember that year? I think it was 2019. It was Freddie Kitchens' era when something really bad happened. I think we gave the ball back to Russell Wilson before halftime and he scored, and it was just a disaster of a game. And I remember my dad saying to me, I would be like, nothing makes me more unhappy than I have to drive all the way up to Cleveland, watch them get beat and lose in some crazy fashion. And then I have to walk out of the stadium with 20,000 angry and drunk people to get home. So that's my dad's like whole experience of what a Cleveland Browns game is like. So of course, like his mood going into the game on Sunday was like, I'm just going to expect them to lose. My mom's sitting there like, no, they're going to win. They're coming off of a loss. It's going to be great. And so when we got in position, I know we're going to talk about it, to actually be able to win the game with the field goal, my mom is standing in the center aisle of the steps, like bent over the railing, like can barely look. My dad turns to look at me and he goes, she doesn't know he's going to miss the kick. And honest to God, I was like, can you be any more pessimistic? And what do you know, Pete? That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. My impression is that the stadium was full of about 50,000 of your dad. It really felt like this is the case with the Steelers game too, it's very, Kevin Stefanski praised the fans and all this, but it really feels like, going into the game, it's apprehensive before the game has started. Yes. And it feels like they are waiting for the bad to come.
Yes.
Another game where the Browns were booed despite the fact they were winning at the time. What am I going to do? Blame people for that? And then they did exactly what the people thought they would. It's tough. Like, it's not a situation you want to be in. And I get it, because, whether people are not happy that the Browns are effectively having what amounts to a lost season as they wait for Deshaun Watson. And I get it. So there's sort of this element of, we're going to games that, we want to matter, but don't really matter. And they're not playing as well as they could be and all these other things. So it's sort of a weird home field situation that everybody's sort of attending what feels like a little bit of an execution in some ways.
Yeah. And I will say there were a lot of Chargers fans at the stadium on Sunday. I didn't actually think they had that many fans, but there was a lot of yellow and gold in the seats. I was shocked by that.
Well, none of them attend their home games. Any of them.
So they travel to Cleveland.
Yes. Nobody's at SoFi Stadium when the Chargers are playing there. It's rough in that end. But you seemed certainly more agitated than I was coming out of this game. I was more agitated than usual.
Yeah, you're right, because I've prided myself with really not letting this team or the outcome of this team, whether it's a win or a loss, really get me too high or too low, just in general. That's been my theme for a couple of years now, just because I don't want it to impact my overall mood. But I will say, like, being there in person and watching the events go down in person was exactly as you said. It was just, there was just so much anxiety kind of filled throughout the stadium, throughout the entire game. But watching the defense just get run over and seeing what's his face, I've already forgotten his name. I've blanked him out.
Austin Eckler.
Thank you. I mean, he was literally just like stumbling into first downs, like tripping into first downs. He was untouched. The defenders were just tackling air. I mean, I always said this about attending games in person. When that stadium announcer comes on and yells out, "It's down," I'm like, can we not even say that? Like, this actually, it actually feels like people are punking us. It's like a mockery when you're there watching it in person. Like, how can I actually get hyped to hype up this defense? Because like, I know they're going to convert a first down. I know that someone's going to miss a tackle. I know there's going to be a blown coverage. I mean, it's like not even fun to watch because it's just like, okay, just let him go down and score, I guess, and we'll get the ball back.
Which is interesting because one of the few things the Browns are doing is third down. Like,
yeah. And their red zone defense, honestly, was like, they actually made some stops when it came right down to it.
It's interesting because look, there's nothing that will sort of sap your soul than watching, especially if you have to, you're the unfortunate players on the field having it happen to you. But certainly as an onlooker, it feels like you're watching just a slaughter. And
yes,
like you almost want to cover your eyes, or you feel like you're not supposed to look at it because it's so bad. And all that's happening. And it's weird. The Chargers only converted 3 of their 10 third down conversions, which you wouldn't feel like it watching it, but that's true. They only converted 2 of their 5 red zone opportunities into touchdowns, which again was part of the reason the Browns had the opportunity to win when they did. None of that changed the fact you don't want them to have 5 opportunities in the red zone. The other part that was sort of weird was that obviously this is partly because Austin Eckler was able to run so much. Justin Herbert really didn't do as much as you would have thought he would. And he killed the linebacker. Like everything they threw was killing linebackers or Denzel Ward. But the secondary, by and large, did a good job with their receivers and those guys down the field. Denzel Ward got beat a couple of times. For the most part, like Mike Williams is like 3 Denzel Wards in a giant trench coat. And he just physically overpowers him. But like, if you're just looking at coverage and stuff, you're sitting there going, okay, I can live with this. And then as long as they can get those stops, it's not good defense, but you can win with it. And unfortunately, they got all of those things out of the defense. And then to get the offense, the group that if you're going to have a defense that's playing as poorly as it is, having an offense that is been as good as the Browns have, you're sitting there going, as long as I get the ball with a chance to win at the end, I feel good about it. And that's sort of the thing I think gets lost in this is as people yell in my mentions about how the defense is responsible for their record. The offense is as good as it is, so you want them to be able to win. And then you finally, you cap it all off with Cade York missing 2 field goals, the 45-yarder and the 54-yarder. I'm not going to kill the kid, but obviously that's what he was drafted to do. So all of those things add up. And so I can only imagine what it's like to go out of that stadium where literally all 3 of those things failed. Defense failed. Jacoby Brissett failed on the drive where he threw the really bad interception. And then Cade York failed. And any one of those things would have won the game. And instead they leave with a loss and another sort of sinking feeling of this team could be 5-0 and all this other crap, or just any one of those games, 3-2, 4-1, whatever. And instead you're a mediocre 2-3. I get it. It doesn't feel good. My perspective, I guess, is a little different. One, I don't know why people were surprised they got run over. You saw it the week before and you're sitting there going, what changed? Their defensive tackles are the worst.
Yeah.
They have to be the worst in the history of the franchise.
Pete, you know what I think it was the fact that coming into this game, the Chargers were not a good run team. So you were sitting here thinking like Justin Herbert, their pass game was really good. You expected them to really struggle when it came to the pass defense. And I mean, at one point in the second quarter, they had more yards in the game than they had in the first 4 games. I mean, that is like, how is it that the Cleveland Browns can somehow make the team that they are playing against worst trait somehow the best trait when they play against them? I mean, it is mind-boggling to me that we just completely fall apart to the point of making teams that aren't good at doing certain things look really good at doing certain things.
Well, that will not be the case against the New England Patriots. I can promise you that. Their best trait will be their best trait, which is running the ball right down the opponent's throat with Ramondre Stevenson. But in any case, the biggest thing you're running into is you have, like I said, the worst defensive tackle play in franchise history. And what it's doing is not forcing your linebackers, who need to be able to play downhill. Your safeties need to be able to play downhill, and they're having to play side to side. They're not built to do it. Any team at any level, you don't want that to happen. When Maddox is in flag, you don't want him doing it. But that's where they're at. And you've got these little, very little linebackers who now play side to side, don't get any momentum, and they're just getting dragged around by these backs who are able to go and just unencumbered into that level. So these two things combined make for a defense that is going to continue to suck unless something changes. Now, Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett, as they get healthier, that should change a little bit. They hide that slightly, but ultimately you can't hide those two guys in the middle. They're clearly that's ultimately the problem. So
Pete, can I ask you a question though?
Yeah.
Okay, take an unbiased approach here. And maybe I need to do the same thing, or just all of us in general as fans of this team. I started to think after the game, is the defense really that talented? Okay, so if you had to pick from the defensive side of the ball, the players that are really good, elite, would be on another team in a heartbeat if we let them go. So who would you say? Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney?
Yes.
Denzel? Or is he kind of like...
No, he's obviously going to start for another team, but he's not playing particularly well this year. The thing that comes to mind when I watch Denzel Ward right now is Roger Dorn. He doesn't want to get dirty. He
got all that money,
and got all, so that just has that vision of me that he's a little bit like Roger Dorn right now. And look, I think he will be ultimately fine. He's certainly not the first player to get a whole lot of money at some point and sort of let the foot off the pedal just a little bit. That's not what you want to hear when you give a guy like $25 million, however much you got in cash this year. But it happens. He would obviously play for another. JOK would start for another team.
Okay, I understand playing for another team, but are these guys outside of JD and Myles Garrett, are these other guys, are they really as good as we think they are?
Well, I would say no, and I'd immediately pivot and go, just look at Kareem Hunt and the way people think he's a top 5 running back. He's not, but whatever. But there's an element of truth in the fact that the Browns aren't quite as good as people want them to be.
Yeah.
I still think a guy like Grant Delpit has a lot more in there. He's a guy that we looked at and said, he should be a breakout stud this year.
Yep.
It's not there yet, even though he's playing much better lately than he has in the first game. John Johnson continues to frustrate the shit out of me.
Yes.
And the meltdown that he had is difficult to sort of stomach. And I don't know, you can defend a lot and say they're mad and frustrated and all this other stuff, but it would have been 3rd and 5. I get it. The ref missed a call. You can't take, it was 30 full seconds after the play was over.
That was on the other side of the field, so I didn't actually see what happened because they didn't show the replay.
But he threw a temper tantrum, and they finally threw a flag on him. So instead of getting a call that probably should have been called for an illegal crackback block, they get a 15-yard penalty, and it goes from what would have been 3rd and 5 if the call doesn't go their way. Fine, 3rd and 5, get a stop, get off the field, to 1st and 10. And nothing was done about it. And I get it. I don't want to have to throw D'Anthony Bell out there, but something has to happen at that point. You just can't have that happen and just be like, okay, next play. That's tough for me to watch. It's childish on his part. Certainly not. It's amateurish. All that stuff. That stuff you have to get rid of, whatever that involves. And I'm not saying you need to cut him or anything, but you just can't have that you're literally having a player just kill your team because he can't control himself or whatever that is, that drew the penalty. I'm sure he said a few magic words, but that stuff's that's tough to stomach. The flip side of that is MJ Emerson is playing very well for a rookie. There's some guys that you are happy about. Jacob Phillips can't play dead. That's ultimately why we'll get there with Deion Jones. but Tommy Togiai and Jordan Elliott and Taven Bryan are just awful. And I think that's so much of this issue is like, I grant you're right on a lot of levels with saying how talented this defense is. I can't understate, or I can't say enough how much that dynamic of just ghastly defensive tackle play, like the Browns would kill somebody to get the defensive tackle play they had last year, which was the worst in the league.
Right.
It's that bad. And it's doing so much to just make players look worse than they are. And that's why, like JOK, and to Deion Jones, if he works out, the whole point is you're getting these smaller guys who can fly around. And like Bill Belichick came out today and said, what's his impression of the Browns defense? They're fast. They are fast.
Yeah.
But because they are so soft in the middle, it is negating all the benefits. So I think you're right. But I also think some of what's going on in the flaws that they have are, one, not going away right now. Maybe there's something to be done, but unless things get better, it's going to look like this. And then let's fast forward and say they get to the offseason and they suddenly sign two, not just like average defensive tackles, middle of the road in this league. The whole defense probably looks completely different compared to what they're getting right now. So then all of those guys suddenly look more talented, maybe.
But Pete, I guess where I'm at with this is like we all, I think as fans, we're all concerned about defensive tackle this entire offseason, and nothing was really done. I mean, maybe Andrew Berry and staff felt like the guys that they had could fill in from who they were developing last year.
Not really.
Like it feels like that. Sure, it's an issue right now, but it was something that could have been addressed a long time ago before we even got to this point.
Okay. And I've written about this a couple times, but we'll get into this. So this past off season, there were a couple things going on. One, they had just had this whole fallout with Baker Mayfield. They're trying to negotiate with or lure Deshaun Watson at that point. While that's all going on, if you're a free agent and you're looking around the league, how interested are you in going to Cleveland at that point with just a mess at quarterback and no certainty? And so let's say in March, when free agency gets going, all you're seeing right now in Cleveland is the Baker Mayfield back and forth that he's essentially demanded the trade, all this stuff. The owner or somebody came out and said they need an adult in the room and all this stuff that just doesn't look good. If you're an agent, if you're a player, you're going, I don't know about that. And then they make the trade for Deshaun Watson. And all of a sudden you're going, hey, that looks pretty good. But then you have this whole sort of a shooter drop in terms of what's going to happen because of the off field.
Is he going to even play this year?
So again, you're an agent or you're a player. You're going, do I really want to go to Cleveland right now? And the answer is no. Combine that with the fact that the Browns also know this. They know that they've got the mess going on with Baker Mayfield, and then they get Deshaun Watson, and then they know he's going to get suspended. They don't know how long he's going to be suspended. And the Browns treated it like, look, we're going to take care of some things we can take care of. We're going to do a few things around the edges, but we're really looking ahead to 2023. So what did they do? They trade for Amari Cooper. They did not sign him. They traded for him.
Yep.
They didn't have to attract him to the job. They trade for him in part the weekend before they get Deshaun Watson. That's all in an attempt to get him to come. They then defer. They then convert a bunch of Amari Cooper's salary into a signing bonus. Why? Because now his base salary this year is very low. It helps create cap space that they can defer down the road. They extend David Njoku. He's making literally nothing this year, in part because he was going to make the franchise tag. They negotiate the extension. So the Browns are actually saving money on the first 2 years of his contract because he's making so little in the first 2 years. They extend Denzel Ward, who's making nothing in the first year. So all of this is in a move to sort of set them up to keep money going down the road so that they can roll over a ton of money. Right now, it's approximately $35 million that will become $70 million next year, which is going to, one, help them pay for some of those costs that are going to increase when those contracts go up, but two, also allow them to be buyers. So
yeah, because it's not like we have draft assets, that
are more than people want to acknowledge. They have like 8 picks, but you're right.
But
you're
we kind of know
right.
how that works right now at this point.
And then what is their their big free agent signing, it's Taven Bryan, who is an unproven defensive tackle that you basically took a shot on. It's not going too well, but he's making like $4 million for a 1-year deal. It's a tryout. It's an audition. He's fitting in right with a lot of these other players their position that are auditioning. They didn't sign a major free agent at all. And if you're the Browns, you're sitting there going, every dollar we spend this year is $2 we can't spend next year. So if you're looking at this, you're going, even again, they didn't know at that point, but Deshaun Watson ultimately going to be suspended for 11 games. You're going, how much money do I want to invest in this year that's going to cost me next year when Deshaun Watson is going to be back operational, the whole thing, the whole season, the whole off season, when you are theoretically in position to contend. So on the one hand, your free agents out there are going, I don't feel good about this. And if in order to attract them, they're probably going to want more money. And if you're Browns, you're sitting there going, I don't know how I want to go out and get some of these veterans that maybe signed for a 1-year deal when we're not really thinking we're going to contend this year and we want to keep all the money we get. So the timing didn't work out. Now, as a fan, if I look to you and say all this, you're probably going, well, that sucks. I was kind of hoping we'd do something in 2022 and You're telling me that it's not going to work out. And that's sort of the where you get this sort of clash in terms of how the Browns have approached the season versus how fans want to approach the season. Like, and the decisions they make with Baker Mayfield's health. And obviously that's not working out too well right now for him and everything with Carolina. You didn't have a good option to sort of get a quarterback to contend this year. Russell Wilson told you no. Yeah. Aaron Rodgers told you no. You go get Deshaun Watson and you get him, but that sort of inherently meant you were deferring a year. So they did some things that helped. Amari Cooper has been unbelievable so far. But part of the reason those guys said no at the time was David Njoku was still sort of more potential than proven. DPJ, I don't know if Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson know who DPJ is. Right. And then you get Amari Cooper and you're just going, that's nice, but is this really what we want to do? So all of these things combine and you get into this situation where you're going, we should be a pretty good team, but we're not a good team or a great team this year, but in 2023 we will be. So if you go into 2023, let's say Deshaun Watson looks pretty good those last 6 games or whatever, whether they make the playoffs or not, then you go into the next offseason. Now free agents are sitting there going, okay, Cleveland looks pretty good. I may not need as much money to go there. And suddenly I'm going to a place where I can theoretically contend and I don't have to I'm not going to sit there worrying about climate or any of the other stuff. So that's where you sort of look at this and you go, well, why didn't they address defensive tackle? Well, they signed Taven Bryan and they drafted Perrion Winfrey. Fart. Those aren't really great moves that are going to upgrade the position. And then you sit there and go, man, I really hope Jordan Elliott steps up. I hope Tommy Togiai gets better. And all you heard through the summer was, man, Jordan Elliott changed his body. He looks so much better than he did last year, all this other stuff. And we get into the season and he sucks. So, that's unfortunately. And like I wrote, literally,
that's really funny.
As I wrote, it's like the Browns did all these things and deferred all this stuff and basically went with the defensive line they had. And part of this is they drafted rookies on the edges too that aren't ready. Alex Wright may be talented, but he's not very good. And, the assurance they had, they're basically their backup approach was fingers crossed. So that's sort of where you get the storm of bad things happening.
Well, yeah. And like, I understand all of that and the complexity of just like how everything went down. And obviously when they were going through some of these decisions, they didn't have an actual idea of like when Deshaun would or would not be playing. So, I mean, there was a lot of, I'm sure, scenarios thrown out there just overall of probably like multiple plans in place. But yes, I think from a fan's perspective, it is frustrating to just sit here and watch this week in and week out when you have an offense that seems to be exceeding expectations. And based on the moves that Andrew Berry made literally on Sunday night after watching the atrocity go down, he clearly saw that there is a problem and it needed addressed immediately. So I think that's where maybe some of this confusion stems from the fans' perspective is, does he think that we are contending this year? Because based on some of the moves that he's made this week, like it feels like he thinks that there's a shot once Deshaun Watson gets back that there may be a fighting chance.
The Deion Jones pick or the trade works on so many levels because it does send this message. Oh, no, we're serious about this season. The reality of that situation is, one, Deion Jones makes nothing this year. The Falcons are paid him guaranteed $17 million. They're eating to get rid of him for a pick swap in 2024. But if it works out and he can reclaim the 2020 form he had, he's a pretty good player who fits exactly what the Browns want to do. He's certainly an upgrade over Jacob Phillips. But with the defensive tackle questions you have, how much better is that going to be? Hard to say. He should at least, be willing to do some of the run fits that Jacob Phillips wasn't. He should be better in coverage in some of the ways that Jacob Phillips was. So it's good on a lot of levels. But again, he's making nothing this year. And if the Browns decided he's not working out, they cut him next year. It has zero penalty on them at all. So basically he's making like what's left of a $1.14 million base salary so far this year. And then there's some roster bonuses that they're responsible for. But the other part of this is, it's not like if the Browns are to make the playoffs this year, it will come off like a great movie script. This idea that Andrew Berry was grinding away late in the night to make this trade happen with the Falcons. The reality is they had to have been talking about this a few weeks ago. I suspect as soon as Anthony Walker went down, this is one of the calls he made. And the reason it timed the way it did is because was still recovering from his shoulder surgery, and he was on injured reserve,
IR, right? Yeah.
So one, he has to be able to pass a physical, and then two, he has to be able to be past the four game minimum of injured reserve. So it looks really, dramatic in all of this that they sort of trade for him on Sunday night,
same night.
But what the reality is, they had to do it that way because the Browns needed to be able to activate him. They needed to be pass a physical and try to maximize as much time they could. He's been in the facility 2 days and then practiced today. We're recording on this on a Wednesday. Will he be ready for Sunday? The Browns aren't ruling him out. I suspect he's playing.
Wild.
But that's
good. Throw him out there.
But that's sort of where they're at. And they did the same thing with Tyler Davison. Tyler Davison, one, needs to learn how to spell his name, Tyler. Come on. But he is a guy that sort of makes a lot of sense in that, one, you didn't have to cut anybody from your active roster, even though that may be coming to get him. He is at least somewhat of a professional player. He's not good, but he's potentially stemming closer to mediocre as opposed to just awful.
Well, hey, that's an improvement.
So if you activate him, your rotation is theoretically better, and you don't need great for this thing to work.
We're striving for mediocrity at this point. Okay. Yes. Mediocrity is good.
That would be a massive improvement for the Browns right now. So these are moves that sort of look good in a way. One, PR, they do look good on that, but I think realistically, in the same way that Jordan Elliott is, and a lot of these other players are, the receivers, defensive tackles, whatever, it's an audition for Deion Jones. I'm rooting like hell that this works, but if it gives them 2 bites of the apple. So if Deion Jones is great the rest of this year, the Browns will probably work some sort of contract magic on him to sort of keep him around for a little less money. He's on the hook for like $12 million next year. I don't think they're going to pay him $12 million. Or Anthony Walker recovers really well from his injury, and then they can if he's back and ready to go, they can just re-sign him in the offseason. Mm-hmm. So they've really got 2 swings to get that one position filled for next year. So it's great in that it sort of helps you a little bit now, but it's also really about 2023 and how much better that can make you. So it's a lot of these things that you can say, oh, Andrew Berry's trying to make this thing work. And he is, but it's also with an eye down the road, which is what should happen. And it's the prototypical Andrew Berry trade. It's a pick swap. The Browns don't want to lose any more picks. So they trade from the 6th round in 2024 to the 7th round in 2024, which really doesn't say much for what the Falcons thought of Deion Jones at this point, or his fit within their defense. You're getting a player for nothing. It may not work, but it's totally worth what they're doing and the attempts they're making to see if they can find something better. Because if they get slight improvement from linebacker and defensive tackle, the whole thing will change around. But I think, and it's tough to sort of look at it like this because you look at the standings, you go 2-3. They are 2-3. If Deshaun Watson plays in those all 5 games, They're 5-0. Their 3 losses are lost by a combined 6 points.
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson in this offense is going to give you 6 more points at least 6 more points in those games than Jacoby Brissett. He just is like, and if he's not, then that's a real problem. But it's difficult to look at it and go, oh, they'd be great if Deshaun Watson is available, but he's not. And it's his own stupid fault. But that all ties into why I totally understand any fan's frustration of going, like, why should I, why should I have to wait again when I've had to do this so many times?
It's this whole like hurry up and wait situation. I mean, we've been waiting for decades. So like, it's a lot to ask this fan base to be patient, and it permeates week to week to week when you're watching it live. I don't know, Pete, if you saw the video. I saw someone taking a video of Jimmy Haslam at the end of the game watching the missed field goal. Did you happen to see that?
No, I can only imagine.
I'll have to find it and send it to you. But I was like, I think he almost shriveled up, like right on the field. Like I feel like he literally was like shriveled up and just like so angry.
Well, and so some of the stuff I've seen this week are like people turning on Myles Garrett. It's like, what are you doing? There's a whole bunch.
Are you surprised? I mean, I'm not surprised by that.
No, but I just, I tried to tell people last year that if you got rid of sort of the Mayfield Odell drama, which was never as big of a deal as people wanted to make it into, was removed.
Something else.
That something else is going to come up because they're 50, they're 53 or however many humans in a space that something's going to come up. Now, this idea that somehow Myles Garrett's not a leader anymore or whatever is just, to me, again, you get into this.
That's situation. Because Pete, everyone's been saying fire Joe Woods. So like that now is old news. So now it's like fire Joe Woods and also get rid of Myles Garrett. That's like where we're at on the spectrum.
Well, like I saw some stupid thing about how like Myles Garrett isn't in the same realm as TJ Watt and Aaron Donald.
Yeah.
But he is maybe not even in the same level as Joey or Nick Bosa, which is mind-boggling. He's better than both and way more available, as those guys tend to get hurt quite a bit. Be that as may. Well, yes, it's we fans. Football is such a weird, mystical sport for some people in a way baseball is. And I poked fun at this while I was trying to think of a title for an article that, watching the Guardians game they get bases loaded, they get nothing. Ugh. Like who's getting fired for this?
Right.
Or,
yeah, I know.
The pitch that goes out of the stadium, what kind of call, that catcher or coach should lose, pitch calling duty.
If a pitcher has a bad outing, the pitching coach gets fired. It's exhausting. I mean, I'm at the point right now where like you could literally fire Joe Woods tomorrow, bring in the best defensive coordinator that ever existed in the entire world, and I don't think we'll see any type of improvement from this.
No, you like it's difficult, and this is what it's very difficult for me to like explain this to people. You cannot scheme away defensive tackle. I've heard arguments that you want to get in an odd front and have less defensive tackles on the field. Theoretically, you're sitting there going, yeah, it makes sense. They suck. We might as well play less of them. But the problem is now you are in a situation, and this is why Deion Jones is here, because the Falcons have a base odd front. He doesn't fit. He was awful in that because you have one guy suddenly, if that guy doesn't do his job well, and based on what we've seen, that wouldn't happen. Then now you've got guards going up to JOK and Deion Jones unencumbered and just getting wiped out. Like it's not what you want to have happen. It's very difficult to get away and somehow come up with a defense that basically says, no, you can have the line of scrimmage. We'll figure it out from behind here and somehow stop you. It just doesn't work that way. And, that's why the Joe Woods stuff is fine. Maybe he's ultimately not the right guy, whatever. But I don't know who they think can make this thing work without those positions. And like the other part that I'm sort of torn on this team, and for all the reasons that we're irritated with the defense that are completely warranted, I'm sitting here looking at the offense going, Deshaun Watson has to be pumped to play in this offense. They are 5th in yardage. They are 6th in points. PFF has the overall top rated offense in the league right now per their grading. We went this season and for all the reasons that like Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, like, hey, I don't want to do that. Amari Cooper is fantastic. David Njoku is the franchise tight end we wanted. He's like crushing it right now. in any form of grading or just watching him, DPJ has stepped up to be a very nice number 3 player. Nick Chubb is having the best season of his career. Kareem Hunt is fine. He's contributing in the ways he does, which makes him a problem. And you've got all these other little pieces that if Deshaun Watson's in there, I think become more valuable because Jacoby Brissett, God bless him, does a lot of things well, but he does tend to default to Amari Cooper or, the few targets he really trusts. And you're missing plays like DPJ is third on the team in receiving, but he should have a lot more yards. The number of times you've seen him wide open in the middle of the field,
and,
sitting there
and the times that Jacoby just like makes a bad throw overall.
Yeah.
Like there are just some like super easy throws that like he just has to make that like they're just off by a tick.
So as much as like you sit here and go, man, this is awful, and there are any number of reasons to feel that way, like Deshaun Watson has to be like thrilled, one, that he picked Cleveland given what he's looking at, and he can respect the hell out of Jacoby Brissett, but he's sitting there going, if I was in there, we'd probably be number 1 in all of those categories and we'd be undefeated, which boiled down to it was the point. That's where they want to go. And if they are 5-0, we're still mad about the defense, but we're not literally trying to tear the whole thing apart as we are now.
Well, and that's kind of what I was like thinking on Sunday. And I think I even tweeted about this, but the way that the defense is playing right now, it's number one, they're not reliable overall. Like they have their moments, right? Like they have some moments where, to your point, they can get a stop on 3rd down or even 4th down from what we saw on Sunday, but they're just not consistently reliable. And so it feels like the offense is put into a position to have to bail the defense out, whether that means like, field goals at this point it's like we have to go for a touchdown because like the defense you're just not sure what's going to happen, and or the offense kind of has to just go to toe to toe with the other team and deal with a shootout. And I think the way that we're constructed right now is to not really want to be in a shootout type of game because Jacoby Brissett right now is struggling when it comes down to like the final 3 minutes of the game, right? When he's put in a position to have to either come back from behind or make a significant play, like that's where he's falling short. I think everything else up until this point, like he's been pretty solid. He doesn't really make a ton of mistakes, but it's when it comes right down to the wire of needing to make a play or needing something to happen is when things kind of fall apart. So I think the offense as it's constructed right now, there is a lot of talent on this team. And I think once Deshaun Watson comes back, I think we're going to kind of see all of that come to fruition and we'll feel less anxiety, towards these critical moments with the ball in his hands versus Jacoby Brissett's. But yeah, like I don't want to see this offense have to be in a shootout. Like I really don't. I think the offense is great. I think we are in games because of this offense specifically. I just don't want them to be in that position. I really don't.
No, and it's not, it's not quote unquote fair, but it's just what you're doing. And the thing is, like, we can complain about Jacoby Brissett and all these other things. He's playing more than well enough for the Browns to be in games, which was a concern coming into this. The stuff, he's having the best season of his career to this point. The stuff he's not doing is what separates him from the guy you brought in. Like if he was making those plays, he wouldn't be making $4.5 million this year. So yeah, like I said, it's frustrating to be in that situation, to have to do that. But like the offense also sits there. I promise you the offense sits there going, just get us the ball with a chance to win. Yeah. And they're doing that. Like that is what has happened. The Browns have lost the last 2 games in that position. And I have no doubt that the offense is sitting there going, we have to win this game. We have to make this happen. I'm not in any way, shape, or form worried about like Cade York yet. It doesn't make me happy that he touched 2 field goals, but there are certainly people out there who are ready to cut him.
Oh gosh,
and all this stuff. But it's just, like I said, it is all of this stuff going on this season is to get this out of them for next season. And that sucks to hear because, again, you're deferring your dreams and all that. That is a lot of what this is. Cade York has to figure out the Cleveland climate and the AFC North climate in this year. Yeah. And all these other guys have to get. The other thing that I think is super positive about the offense is Jedric Wills.
Yes.
He's been great. And this is, again, and I make this point with Njoku. It took David Njoku 5 years to be now one of the best tight ends in football. Hopefully it stays that way. Who knows? But Jedric Wills is another guy. who played reasonably well as a rookie, then got hurt in the playoff game. Then he comes back in year 2. He gets hurt immediately, and he shouldn't have been playing in some of those games, but they literally had no one else. And he didn't play well because he couldn't move. And then people were ready to get rid of him. Like people had given up on him. And then he comes out. He doesn't play great the first couple games. And people, again, right, let's move on, whatever. And then the last 3, and particularly the last 2, he's been tremendous in terms of not just pass protection or winning at the point of attack on the left, but he's become a focal point in that pin and pull game where they're wrapping him around to the right. And a lot of those big runs, including that 41-yard touchdown, he's getting all the way over, getting a key block, and allowing Nick Chubb to do what he does. So that's one more thing that you're sitting there going, man, this is all these things are coming together. Like everything is coming together on offense perfectly, and everything on defense is going exactly the worst way possible.
Yeah,
so
falling apart.
The yin and yang of this team, it is getting them into a perfect balance of mediocrity on this.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think we live in a time too of just instant gratification or wanting instant gratification just in general. But people have to remember, like, you can't make these brash decisions of like moving on from. It's not like there's left tackles on the street that are really, really good that can just step in and play. Otherwise, they'd be on a football team. I mean, these are highly regarded positions that just good players just don't come around often that you can just sign and pick up off the street. And honestly, like Pete, that goes for kickers too. I mean, we would have had a kicker last year if we felt like there was one available to be signed, like on this roster. Like people just need to have a little bit more patience here. Like, can we just calm down a little bit? And like everyone wanted to get rid of David Njoku 2 years ago when he couldn't catch
so basically
passes.
Since he's gotten here.
Yeah. I mean, like, let's just calm down, people. But Browns fans have never been rational. So that's a lot to expect.
And it's not, and the only thing I would say is it's the NFL as a whole is irrational, because I have no doubt, and I see it. Ravens fans and Steelers fans who want to get rid of their Super Bowl winning head coaches. So I mean, like,
it's my favorite.
It's insane. Now the thing that sort of twists, rubs a little salt in the wound of the Cade York thing is, who is the special teams player of the week this week?
Who is it? I don't know.
Chase McLaughlin.
Stop! I didn't know that.
Yeah, he kicked a bunch of long field goals for the Colts Broncos game. He kicked all 4 field goals.
I didn't know that.
And they were really deep kicks. So, is that an indictment of Mike Prefer? I don't know, but I'm willing to say it is, because I don't like Mike Prefer. But like that's, there's this nature of the thing. Like I've always compared kickers to relief pitchers in baseball, where it's, you never know what you're going to get outside of Mariano Rivera, or God willing, if you're a Guardians fan, Emmanuel Clase, that hopefully they're just locked down every time they're out there. But like, there's this element of every other year, you're not sure. You get one dominant year, you get, and then like Miller, who was really good a couple times and then completely just got awful.
Fell off.
So like, that's sort of what it is. And there's this element of people sort of have to accept that every football season is its own unique thing. So like, the expectation was the Denver Broncos were going to come and be one of the best teams in the AFC. And right now they stink. And there's a lot of teams like that.
I am painfully aware, Pete. I drafted Russell Wilson as my fantasy quarterback. Probably the worst mistake that I have made. I moved on from him.
Well, hopefully his should gets worked out and they can, well, I don't want to say figure it out because I don't like the Broncos, but I don't like him either. I like Russell Wilson more than apparently a lot of people do. But yeah, it's just, you can't just sit there and go, all these teams are going to make the playoffs, because that is why every season you have whatever the number of teams that don't make the replete and make the playoffs. There's always new teams. Everybody assumed that the Bengals were going to, even though I didn't, assume the Bengals were going to pick up right where they left off and be good. The Ravens were supposed to be a Super Bowl contender. Their defense, which is loaded with stars in the secondary, looks like crap. It's a tough pill to swallow. That's the other part. And like Kevin Stefanski, for all the stuff that why I think people want to continue to put him on the hot seat or whatever, he can just point to Jacoby Brissett and go, look, I'm top 5, top 6 in yards and points. Imagine what I can do if I can do that with Jacoby Brissett. Imagine what I can do with Deshaun Watson when he comes back.
Right.
Which all of these things are very fun to me in theory, and I think they will happen. But it's also very easy to understand why so many people are just agitated with his team or irritated. I'm very curious to see how the fans react this week when the Browns play the Patriots. I suspect it's going to be the same feeling of just, especially because it's Bill Belichick.
I'm not going this week. Not doing it.
That it feels like it's going to be another ugly game. I actually think the Browns are going to win this one. I picked the Chargers.
Ooh, Pete.
But it's going to be interesting.
One of these days, Pete, we're going to be on the right side of all of these crazy things that go down.
Yes, and that's ultimately the problem is the Browns beat themselves against, and this is the thing I maintain. The Chargers did not stop the Browns offense once in that game. It was entirely the Browns. And like, this is sort of the part where I also get sort of irritated with people who go, well, the offense scored 28 points. That should be enough. They scored 14 on their first 2 drives.
Yeah.
They scored 14 on the remaining 8. And I get it. 2 of those were missed field goals. One of those was the bad interception. The 4th down counter play, which I didn't love at the time, even, immediately. I don't like pulling linemen on 4th and 1. Just get forward, get the yard, whatever that involves. If it's a sneak, if it's some sort of toss, if it's just going through a different gap. I understand the theory here that if they're all crashing inside and you block it, then all of a sudden that counter is going to be wide open, and maybe it would have been, but Ethan Posick missed the block, and that didn't work out. But like, that's where I sort of look at it and go, okay, the offense is really good, but these are a lot of opportunities they're missing that they do really well, especially coming out of the gate early against a team like the Chargers. And then they just sort of stop. And that's where the offense is sitting there going, no, we needed to score more points. We needed to do more in this game. It's on us, even though the defense was bad and gave up 30. So it's just the nature of the beast with this. You have to, if you have a strength like the Browns have, you've got to be able to lean on it. And that is where they have to be able to score more than 30 points or whatever it is in any given game.
I have nothing else to say. I just don't want to see another situation on Sunday like we saw last week. I don't know if I can handle it, Pete. I really don't. And Bill Belichick's going to do everything in his power to outsmart this team, to pick apart all of our weaknesses and just have at it.
Yeah, well, for them, it's a question of who's playing quarterback.
Yeah.
Is it going to be Bailey Zappi or is it going to be Mac Jones?
First of all, I love that name.
Yes. Well, some of us were aware of Bailey Zappi at Western
cigarette
Kentucky.
later.
But that's part of it. Ramondre Stevenson is a very big, powerful back, which doesn't bode well. The Patriots are really good at power run game and just slamming into people, which the Browns are not good at dealing with.
Clearly,
last year they get.
We're
killed.
really good at tackling air. So if there are any ghost men playing on Sunday, we got them covered.
They have to be able to do better than they did last year against that pin and pull scheme where like receivers were blocking Myles Garrett. And they just killed the defensive tackles last year. But the big difference between, obviously the Patriots killed the Browns, was Mac Jones played really, really well in terms of the throws he made. His stats weren't overwhelming or anything, but he was just dead on accurate. And then the Browns have to have an offense. I think they will have a much better outing offensively than last year. But, Bill Belichick is obviously great at this. He knows Jacoby Brissett. It's tough. I have more faith in Nick Chubb and the offensive line being able to sort of open things up for him. But as I say all this, I'm less and less confident in the pick. But look, this is an important game for the Browns in terms of not only beating the Patriots, another AFC team. They need to get back on the right track. But I think it's also important for their mentality of having a productive week, of being able to shake off some of the mistakes they made last year and being able to rally. Like, I don't want to get into this whole thing of everything becomes a sort of case against Kevin Stefanski, or we're putting Kevin Stefanski on trial here, but these are the things he has to be able to get good at. And, to me, there's no question that he's going to be back next year, but these are sort of the things I want to see him do. How, he did it against the Steelers, was able to rally back on the short week and get them going in the right direction. The Steelers are a pretty bad football team. Bear that in mind. The Patriots are not as bad. Can we sort of see him rally the troops, get them ready to go, have a much better outing coming off a disappointing loss? Those are the things where I want to be able to see him do that, because when you have Deshaun Watson, you have more room for error. So in a lot of ways, like, this weird handicap the Browns are playing with is kind of useful again, things fans don't want to hear, but it's useful to see like your players and your coaches have to operate in these situations. How do they fare in tight games where they have to get a game-winning drive, or they have to get a big stop, or they have to kick a game-winning field goal, or coaching decisions go into these things? Like, these are good tests for guys on this team. And like, the part of this that people sort of forget is that coaches are not done growing. Kevin Stefanski's obviously in his third season, but if you're looking at this in terms of the future, you're going, how much better can he get from this season? I think he can grow a lot from this season to when he gets Watson back, to when hopefully the team has finished their roster and are truly ready to contend. In some ways, you can look at this season and go, this is not fun to watch, other than the things that are, there are things to enjoy, but this could actually help prepare them to be much better down the road.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I'm still a supporter of Kevin Stefanski. I think he's done a great job, all things considering. Is he perfect? No. To your point, I think he is still learning as we go through all of this. And he's not even playing with the quarterback that is the future of this football team. But, at the end of the day, like, you have to also hold players accountable. They are getting paid for this. This is their job. Their jobs are on the line. I don't think it's fair that we continuously just point fingers at the coaching staff. Like, these are adults. This is their full-time job. Like, they need to take some pride in that. And they cannot be happy with what they are seeing and putting out there on tape. I mean, if I were them, like, I would have been embarrassed by that performance.
And that's the other question. Does that sink in for this group? Do they feel that? Do they have that sort of professional pride in this? And are they getting better? And you get into this whole leadership thing with, the players. The stuff that drives me nuts, and this will be the last thing, I swear, as Breeze keeps looking at her watch.
I'm going to fall asleep. Pete knows I've been working like crazy.
This is true. I hate how we have to see leadership in public to acknowledge it's happening.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with that.
And I saw this thing, and I'm not calling anyone out, where they pointed this Chargers clip where Justin Pugh, who's a guard, or not the Chargers, the Cardinals, Justin Pugh comes out and he defends the kicker who missed the kick, and, this F-bomb, tirade about it's not one guy and all this. That's a great moment. But the problem that people have is, and we saw this, was with Jarvis Landry and the Hard Knocks thing. They had to see it to view him as a leader, and all of a sudden he's the greatest leader of all time. Right. But like, I go back to this. When Myles Garrett swung his helmet at Mason Rudolph, the guy who gave the speech in the locker room after that was Joe Bitonio. That does not get any press at all, but that's a big freaking deal.
Yeah.
And like, we saw that, we saw this a little in public last year where Myles Garrett and then the defensive tackle who was here, the former Malik Jackson was here. And they sort of like, they used the media to sort of call out guys who were maybe not as dedicated as they needed to be. And all of a sudden they rallied and had a good game. I don't want to be in a situation where they have to do that every time to get a reaction. Yes. I'm hoping that stuff is happening in the locker room. Like, I don't need to see it. It does not need to be a reality TV show of Browns leadership or any team's leadership.
Yes,
I don't want to see that
scrutinizing.
You don't want to see that with the Guardians. You don't want to see, you certainly don't want to see that with the Cavs this coming season with Donovan Mitchell and all these guys. You don't want to have to like have them scolded publicly to feel like there's leadership. So with that not being the case, how are they going to respond? Is Myles Garrett in there as a leader, or these other guys? Anthony Walker's back in the building, post-surgery. Deion Jones is a guy, obviously he's the new guy here, but he's a guy who's been a leader. Denzel Ward recovering.
Sean Watson's back in the building. I know he's not on the defensive side, but he came back this week.
And that's another interesting sort of aspect of this. Like, he's in the building. What does that look like?
Right.
What is the, he's in meetings and stuff like that. How is that going? There's a lot of these moving parts that are really interesting and sort of bear watching. So with that, I'm going to let Bree go to sleep.
Can we please record an episode after a win? I forget what that's like, Pete.
That'd be
It's been ages.
But we will be back next week after this Patriots game. And hopefully the Browns can help answer some of those questions and show some growth, which is all, again, you want them to hopefully contend for the postseason. That would be great. But what you really need from this team this year is growth on the defensive side of the ball, growth in your coaching staff, growth continuing on offense, all those things where you sit there and go, maybe this wasn't the season we wanted, but maybe it was the season they needed to sort of prepare them for a bigger run. So continue to help us out. Like, subscribe, share, tell a friend, whatever. We'll be back next week.